Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the EmpowerUp podcast. This is the podcast where we talk with people from around the industry, gather their insights on what it takes to get in, or also, answer their questions, understand where they're coming from, and also to kind of expose you guys to different parts of the industry. My name is Byron. I'm a software engineer, and we also have Steve Meehan, who's a professional recruiter. And we have a special guest with us today, Roselynn Conrady, who's doing PhD research in VR, and that's in a field that I'm very interested in. So I think this is going to be a really interesting episode. So Roselynn, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your course of study?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Byron, for having me. My name's Roselynn. I'm a PhD student at the moment. This is the end of my first year, so I got that under my belt. So at the moment, my research interests are, I was telling this to Steve like last month, but I'm really interested in esports. I'm also interested in gaming and research. And of course, I'm also interested in, you know, XR, so the metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality, and the works.
Awesome, awesome. And oh, Steve, were you about to say something?
I was just gonna say, one of the things that I absolutely love about talking with Rosalind is just to hear how passionate she is about what she does. Right? She mentioned video games, AR, metaverse, so many different things. I just kind of wanted to take a step back really quick and ask, out of all of the things in the world, like why these things? Why are they so important to you?
Right, yeah. Also, it's Rosalind,
Rosalind,
so,
sorry.
yeah, it's okay. Um, yeah, so, I mean, so, I guess I'll start, like, the things you do as a kid really, like, define what you do as an adult. So, I love video games. I grew up playing Final Fantasy and stuff. So, gaming always had, like, a special, like, place in my heart. And so that's gaming. And then also esports because even though it's pretty new, I've gotten like really interested in like competitive gaming, especially with like Apex Legends. That's a lot of fun. And then XR or the Metaverse. Um, so that actually came to me during my time at San Diego State because I went to a hackathon. Like someone just mentioned like, hey, there's this hackathon happening. You want to go? And I'm like, yeah, sure. But then that was where I learned about virtual reality for like the first time. I wore like the HTC Vive and I was
Hmm.
like, wow, this is so cool. And then from there I was like, I want to like stay here. I want to like do stuff in this realm. And then ever since then, that's when like, I reached out, co-founded the VR club with some people and, that's also where I met like Byron and Kane and now I'm here at Iowa State hoping to be a researcher in these fields.
And you mentioned that something called a hackathon. For those listening in that don't know what a hackathon is, could you please explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know what a hackathon was until like I started doing them. But yeah, basically it's like a set amount of time where you can work alone, but I highly recommend you work with other people. Where you work on like something for typically a weekend. There's usually a theme as well, and it's a time to just like explore prototypes, whether you're a programmer, an artist, a sound guy, or I should say sound person, um, and present it to judges and hopefully win. But ultimately, as long as you get the experience of like working on something really cool, that's awesome.
Cool, thank you. And like, is there any distinction between a hackathon and a game jam?
I feel like the main difference is Game Jam is more focused on making games, whereas like a hackathon, it could be games, but other times it could be like hardware prototypes or software prototypes, say like a website or something like that.
Gotcha, gotcha. And cool. So you grew up, you loved video games, you got into these things called hackathons, and then now you're doing some pretty incredible stuff in your PhD kind of research. Can you go in depth into some of the stuff that you're studying and looking into right
Sure, and you make me sound so cool. um, yeah, like at the moment, my research has like kind of shifted a little bit because I was originally like co-advised by like two professors, but one of them is leaving. So now I'm kind of like having this opportunity to like adapt and like branch out into like other fields. And at the moment, I'm just kind of just seeing what's out there a little bit more, reading literature, reviewing academic conferences. Like at the moment, I'm like following up on this esports research conference, and it's like the first conference of its kind to focus on esports and stuff. Should I share the link?
Yeah, if you could share the link and share what's the name of the conference, just in case any of the
Yeah.
listeners out there want to hear more, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so it's part of the Esports Research Network Conference 2021. They just finished up like on Friday, and it's really cool just like actually listening to all these like super smart people, these doctors and professors talk about gaming and esports in a way that's like it just feels so validating because you
Yeah.
hear about these things anecdotally, yeah, but then to hear like professionals talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, this is a thing. So yeah.
So,
And
oh, sorry.
and oh, go ahead, Byron.
I'm really curious. So you've mentioned a lot on esports. How does that intersect with VR, AR, and XR, in your opinion?
Yeah, so there's also an article I shared earlier when I was chatting with Byron. It's from CNET. The title is As Facebook Plans the Metaverse, It Struggles to Combat Harassment in VR. And when I was reading this article, I was like, you could replace social VR with like video games and it would read the exact same way. Like, unfortunately, there's a lot of toxicity and bad behavior in these things. But with that said, um, I feel like the metaverse and like people who are going to be in this space can learn a lot from what happens in video games. And that's why I'm really interested in like video games, esports, and the metaverse because they all like share um this digital realm, but you're still like interacting with people. So that's why I'm really super excited to like do more in this space.
And quick question. So you've mentioned the metaverse, and I know for the three of us, that's probably a pretty familiar topic. Um, but I actually had a conversation with a friend last night who wasn't familiar with it. Can you kind of go into what would you just, how would you describe the metaverse?
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of like philosophical like conversations about this too. But from my understanding, the metaverse is like um, basically another world for you to like exist in, like, and be yourself or not be yourself. It depends on what you want to do.
Hmm.
But it's basically just like another reality for you to be in.
Yeah. So with that being said, I know you and I talked about this before the call, but it's stuff that's kind of already out there, right? Yeah, so for those of you guys out there, I know Metaverse is Facebook, or I guess they're Meta now. Their branding
Yeah,
of, I would describe it as technology that's used for gaming to create these social interactions. So a lot of you guys are probably already used to it. If you're playing like MMOs, World of Warcraft, stuff like that, you're probably well versed in kind of what the Metaverse aims to be.
exactly. Yeah, like what Byron said, if you've played World of Warcraft, you've definitely been in like an early version of the metaverse.
So is it just me, or is this like the Matrix come to life?
Someone had to say
Yep.
Okay, just making sure we're on the same page.
it. Oh man, hyped for that next
So,
movie.
and you mentioned going into this whole digital realm of having maybe a different personality. You can either be who you are, you can be someone completely different. What are some of the questions that are being answered that you're finding in your research right now?
Yeah, so I haven't really like, what's the word? Been inside the metaverse in a while. Like when I say the metaverse, what I mean is like don a headset and like go into like VR chat. Um, but from my time in there about like a year ago, I feel like the landscape was a lot different. I think because like Altspace VR, VR Chat,
Hmm.
what's the other one? Rec Room. They were all like really new at the time.
Right.
So like when I was in those spaces, like I think Byron, you were there, and I think Kane was there. We were just kind of like hanging out, and like at the time, it just felt a lot more welcoming, and I think it's because like it was so new. People were just like, yeah, let's figure this thing out together. But I guess now, I since it's been like established for a year or two now, it's starting to like, morph into like what modern gaming is, where you're gonna have the bad actors, and like now that people can like get gesture and stuff the way they want, you'll get like some bad gestures. But I would like to think that a lot of the pros outweigh the cons, because you can still meet some really cool people, and you can like obviously do things that you couldn't do in real life. Like if I wanted to, I could be like a 12-foot cat girl, but you know.
Right, right. That's so cool too. Like, we were just talking before the call too about Black Mirror. I believe
Mhm.
it's the first episode of season 5. Really delves into kind of the pinnacle, the potential of the metaverse. I don't know if you've seen that, Steve, but basically it allows you to have like a VR attachment, which attaches to the side of your head, and you literally play as like it's a Street Fighter game. So you play as your player character. You can feel all the sensations, and you're literally in the game. The
That
Matrix.
is ridiculous to think about all of these possibilities that are coming up within the next few years, few decades, and to see like how fast technology has accelerated over the past maybe 20 years, right?
Hmm.
Because if you
Definitely.
think not too long ago, we didn't even have like um, smartphones, right? We were
Mhm.
all navigating through physical maps or printing things on MapQuest and stuff like that.
Oh
And to
boy.
see how far we've come in the past like 20 years, imagine what's going to happen in the 20 years that are coming up. So, pretty exciting. And then I can imagine there's also some pretty scary things that are coming out as well.
Mhm.
For you, what's your outlook for how technology is progressing, and like what do you think is coming down the road in the next 20 years?
Yeah, definitely there will be, more like a wider adoption of like the metaverse and like metaverse related immersive technologies. With that said, I do envision there would be more like policies and regulation around them, because unlike with video games, now with like this immersive tech, it goes beyond like entertainment now. Like you've probably seen, like, for example, VR being used for like training surgeons,
Hmm.
and like that's a really not only complicated but also literally life or death situation, and
Hmm.
you can't have like any slip ups there. So I do envision a world where we're going to have to coexist with like these digital spaces.
Hmm. That's interesting.
And
That's what's up, Steve?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just think that's really interesting. Just hearing that, I think it's really interesting hearing like the training. I'm really interested to see where that goes in terms of using the VR headset. I know we talked about this even last week on our previous episode, um, but it seems to me like there's going to be a lot of possibility for like a lot of interdisciplinary works in terms of like maybe medical student works with computer science majors to actually get this kind of stuff going. A lot of R&D for that kind of thing.
And
Definitely.
I'm curious, like this, with the technology accelerating as it is, there's so many different ways of kind of interfacing with the computer world. And we've seen everything from VR headsets to things like the Google Glass. And then there's talks about having implants put in your head. Like, do you have any insight into which of those technologies is actually which ones are progressing faster, which ones are more likely in the near future?
Oh boy, there's like research all over the place with like different senses. Um, I think the one that like struck out to me though was like, I think it was with the University of Chicago. Someone made like a smelling like interface thing where like, so like as humans we don't have directional smell. Well, we kind of do. Like, say the stove is like burning, and then you can kind of like like sort of get a general idea of like where that smell's coming from, but generally speaking, like, we don't really have that like directional smell.
Mm-hmm.
But the University of Chicago, one of their graduate students made that directional smelling thing, so you like clip it into your nose, and like when I saw the demonstration, like it was so weird. It was like watching like a cat like stalk a mouse. Like he just put on and he inhaled, and then like he quickly went to the direction where he was supposed to go. And I was like, this is so weird. But yeah, to answer the question though, I think all the senses are being looked into in research, and it's going to be an interesting world where we're going to, like as Byron mentioned with Black Mirror, like be able to be fully immersed and have that multi-sensory feedback in VR, for example.
And are these things you mentioned like something that you clip onto your nose, or we've seen the glasses that you put on, or the headset that you put on? Is this thing going to be like a full on like bodysuit that we put on, like in what was it, Ready Player One, or
Yeah.
is it going to be like the Matrix where they just plug something into the back of your head and then you feel all of the experiences that way? Like, do you have any insight to that?
I definitely think wearable technology, so like with Ready Player One, for example, it would be the way to go. I think most people are going to be pretty afraid of like implantable stuff, because that's pretty scary.
But I mean, there's that dude Elon Musk that's talking about his, you know, the chip implant that he puts into your head. So I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
That's another that's going to be another one of those things that we have to, I don't know, keep in mind going forward, right? But okay, so with you being in school right now, you mentioned that you're in your first year and you've fallen in love with esports, right? So how do you see your career playing out moving forward? I mean, there's so many different opportunities, whether it's research, whether it's working as a professional in gaming, being a professor. Like, how do you see your career evolving at this moment?
Yeah, so at this point in time, I definitely want to stay in research, whether that's like in academia as a professor or as like a industry research engineer scientist. But I definitely would like to like stay within the realm of like gaming and the metaverse specifically, esports too, but mostly with gaming and the metaverse, because I think that's where there's a lot of significant overlap between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And
Um,
then for anybody that wants to like follow in your footsteps, like what recommendations would you have for them? Or maybe another way of wording this is, if you were to give advice to yourself back when you were like transitioning from high school to college, how, like, what type of advice would you give?
Yeah, like, wow, yeah, it's been a wild journey because I originally came into my undergrad at San Diego State University, go Aztecs. Just going like thinking, oh, yeah, I'm gonna get that mechanical engineering bachelor's degree, get an internship somewhere in the middle, and then get an entry level job and work for like the next 40, 50 years. But then, things happened, and then I was like, wait, VR is cool.
mm-hmm.
And oh, grad school, I could like go there to do more cool research. And I realized I found these opportunities because I was just willing to put myself out there and like take the chance and hop on the things that I didn't really know too much about professionally. Um, and so my advice is to just basically don't be afraid to take those professional risks. Like, go ahead and explore that, cool AR headset at that hackathon. Yeah, sure, you may not know anything about C Sharp or programming, but, you know, it's better to just go ahead and start than to never start at all, is how I feel.
Yeah, can we go into that a little bit deeper? How, like, so we talked about this before the call, but how did you find out about Iowa State, right? You mentioned an internship. How much time did you have to prepare for it?
Oh boy. Okay, so procrastination is generally never a good thing. However, in my case, it was actually what changed the trajectory of like my education and professional course here. So I was probably, yeah, so this was like December of like 2018, 2019, and I was like looking at internships instead of studying for an electrical engineering exam. I don't know where I passed the class, but I remember thinking at the time, like, I'm like at this weird point in my life where I thought I was just going to do pure mechanical engineering. But at the same time, I have that itch of like, I want to like explore more, but I don't know what's out there. So I kind of just Googled like, virtual reality internships. I couldn't find anything in San Diego at that time. But then like Iowa State University popped up and I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, this sounds cool. Emerging interfaces and technologies. When's the deadline? Oh, it's like a week from now. All right, time to hound professors and like beg them to like write me letters of recommendations. Fortunately, they were all cool about it. So, oh, another advice: never be afraid to ask, because the worst that could happen is people will just say no.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And also, I seem to remember, right, when we were students together, you mentioned that you had a mentor that you found through the career services program.
I
Can you
did.
can you talk about that and what influence did that have on like where you're at now?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, mentors are like, I'm if I could like say every the names of every single mentor and person who's helped me, we would be here for like years, because you know I didn't go through this journey alone. Like, Steve was there, and the person I think you're talking about, Byron, is Christina Blanco. Um, that's who I found through the Aztec mentoring program at San Diego State. And, at first, it didn't seem like we would be a good match according to like the Aztec mentoring program thing. Because, mechanical engineering, software person, and she was more like business development in the games industry. But then as we like, talked and stuff, it was like, oh, she has a lot of insight onto like what you call it, the administration and like behind the scenes of like, what it takes to publish a game, get the IP, good to go. IP is like intellectual property, so all that legal stuff,
Hmm.
which is actually really helpful for like a technical person who knows nothing about that stuff. So, you need mentors from like across the board. I think you guys like had a podcast about this too, but you know, you are the average of the 5 people you spend most time with.
And you mentioned like having multiple mentors, and I absolutely love that. So it wasn't just development where you found people that could provide some mentorship and some wisdom. What are like other areas where you found mentors and you may not even have been looking for them, but they just somehow found their way into your life? And can you go over some of those other types of mentors that you've had?
For sure, yeah. Like, so of course I have like, technical mentors because my work is very like program heavy and computational heavy. But I find that like you can't just be solely focused on like the tech. You need to like branch out, because as Byron mentioned earlier, a lot of this work is becoming much more interdisciplinary. So you need to be able to like, you know, talk to people outside of tech. So one of my mentors was actually more of like a soft sciences, so like psychology. Um, Her name's Dr. Elizabeth Birdie, as we call her, Dr. Elizabeth Shirtcliffe, so Birdie for short. And she is the one who actually got me into grad school in the first place, because she was like that person who encouraged me, even though she knew nothing about programming and stuff. She was like, you should just try it, apply, and worst case scenario, you're like, hey, this isn't for me. So, with that said, Birdie was actually the one who was like, even though I am like a psychology professor, I also understand that, you will need to work with like people of all different backgrounds. So don't be afraid to just, you know, come to like events and talk about what you do and get to know what other people do. So networking is the key.
And like you mentioned networking and you've got several mentors. Can you can you describe how like how did you find these mentors? And then not only that, but like what makes a healthy like mentor mentee relationship? Because it's not just like you find somebody and then you say, "Hey, can you mentor me?" and then automatically they say yes. Like what's that like for you when it's when you say you find someone that you want to work with, and then how do you kind of nurture that relationship from a mentee standpoint?
Yeah, so mentorship is definitely a two-way road. It's not just, I get all the benefits from like talking to my mentors. Like I definitely feel that like my mentors also learn from me, and they also like kind of also get to like vicariously live through me in that like, they see me making some like I don't want to say mistakes, but like learning opportunities that like they probably experienced at some point in time, and they're like, "Oh, here's what I did." And with that said, to answer your question, to find people, you really just, like as I mentioned earlier, you just kind of have to put yourself out there and like introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn and things like that, so you can keep in touch and ultimately talk about what you're doing. And,
Mhm.
people will like kind of gravitate and like if they're curious, that's great. Then you have like a mentor potentially. And when I say like when you have a mentor, it's not like you'll just ask them. What ends up happening more is like you talk, then you set up another time to talk, like hey, let's grab coffee, or like hey, let's like chat for a little bit, and then that's how you build like I think the word is rapport, where you get to know people and you develop that relationship, and then you know it's always good to like get to know other people through that way too. So yeah.
That is so awesome. And I know that just especially for introverts out there like myself, just kind of putting yourself out there can take some courage. It can take some getting out of your comfort zone. Um,
Absolutely.
has that been a challenge for you? And if so, like how have you been able to overcome those?
Oh yeah, so as you mentioned, like I'm also an introvert, so it is kind of tough sometimes because your social battery is like very limited. But with that said, um, I think it also comes from like being comfortable with being yourself, if that makes sense. Because I feel like when I have to meet people in a professional setting, I have to like put on the professional Roselynn mask. I have to make sure I'm like serious and not, you know, like happy and bubbly. But then I found like, oh wow, that's kind of tiring. But then also, I feel like when I'm more myself, like smiling and like, you know, being dorky, people tend to like appreciate that more because it shows you're more human and things. So don't be afraid to be yourself. But then also, you know, people are just as nervous as you are, so it'll be okay.
So I'm curious, in terms of like VR, AR, stuff like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like it seems to me, I've noticed it's difficult to find kind of events that are, people are interested in that kind of field. Do you have like any organizations or anything like that that you could recommend? Like I know there's IGDA or the Game Dev Shrink Up for specifically for game development. But I know it's VR and AR can be a little bit broader than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's also part of the reason why I moved out here to the cornfields, because I wanted to like meet more people who were doing like VR, AR, metaverse research. So fortunately, I have like a great network out here at Iowa State University. But I know there's also Discord servers that are like focused on like um, not just games in VR and AR, but just that space in general. Um, like there's the HTC Vive Steam VR, Discord, VR gamers and devs. I'm trying to think of a couple other off the top of my head. But yeah, should I like link these as well? Or
Yeah, sure. And then we can post those in the description.
cool. Yeah, probably do that after this call.
Okay.
But yeah, and also, at least in my experience, starting like a club or starting a meetup is also the another way to go about it, because you'll be surprised like how many people in your area are interested in this stuff, but everyone's just kind of like isolated, and being that person to like wrangle them all up together and like say like, hey, we're meeting at Buffalo Wild Wings in
Hmm.
Mission Valley later.
Yes,
you know
yes.
let's talk about VR and like all that cool stuff.
Let's dig a little bit more into that too, right?
Mhm.
I actually forgot that you co-founded the VR Club, but can you talk about some of the projects that you guys developed for it? Because I know that you had a really cool partnership with SDSU.
Yeah, I was, fortunate to have served as the like one of the executive members for like 3 years of my time at San Diego State, and yeah, one of the cool projects was actually the astronomy project,
Mm.
and that actually got taken up to like scientific conferences. And I think Byron, were you part of that? I know Kane was part of that.
I helped out a little bit on that project. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did a little bit of sound stuff for that.
Yeah.
So that one was really cool. That one was actually because some professors at San Diego State approached us saying like, "Hey, we saw your previous work with the club and we want, you guys to make something similar for our astronomy students. So, can you do it?" And then, some of our club members stepped up to it, and it's really cool to just, you know, see these projects come out, because it's like I wasn't anticipating like when I was founding this club, I wasn't really anticipating, these projects to go up to that next level, but they did, and it's really satisfying and rewarding to know I helped like create this opportunity for people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys got to speak at the conference too, didn't you? Or
I wasn't actually there for that, but yeah, Kane, Carter, and I think Vanessa and Samantha, they spoke, and that was really cool. I hope I'm
So
not
can you
missing anyone.
can you describe what was this project? You mentioned astronomy, you mentioned VR. Like, what was the purpose of this project that you worked on?
Oh, so I actually didn't work on the astronomy project personally, but I was just there to like facilitate the club space and stuff that for that project. But yeah, the astronomy project was basically to help. I think it was like the astronomy 101 class. It was an undergrad class. They had this like lab session where traditionally they would use pen and paper and some like cool light tricks to like kind of simulate like light passing and things, because astronomy has to deal with like light, like speed of light and things. um but with that said, pen and paper, sure, it'll get the job done, but it's not as like memorable and immersive as you would in VR. So then they took what um the lesson plans from the lab course and put it in VR. So then instead of just seeing pen and paper, you're actually in the universe. You have stars around you, you got planets right in front of you, and then you also have to like physically move, because there's this thing called like the parallax effect. You've probably heard it in gaming, but so parallax is like let's see. Actually, Byron or Steve, can you explain parallax? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Byron, I'll go to you for this one.
actually, I
Explain the parallax.
don't quite remember what the parallax effect is, so I'll leave it to Roselynn to explain that one.
Okay. So I guess in a nutshell, let's see. I'll use an example actually. So I'm sure most of our listeners have played like a side scroller game at some point. Like a platformer, like Super Mario. And then you notice as you're jumping through the levels, the background moves to the side, and like sometimes you'll have mountains in the back and clouds, and typically the close mountains will move faster than the clouds as you're like moving across the screen. So that's like the parallax effect in a nutshell, where as you're moving, other things are moving with you too, but some objects and things will move slower to like simulate distance. So like slower objects means like, oh, they're much farther away.
Hmm.
Faster objects mean, oh, they're closer. So yeah, we're teaching, or the creators of the astronomy project, we're trying to ultimately teach the parallax effect with stars and planets and a bunch of other like relativity related things, which is really cool.
That is freaking awesome. And then you mentioned that this project was elevated to different conferences and showcased like at astronomy conferences. Um, how did that happen? Like, did they promote it themselves? Was it the professors that promoted it? What happened there?
Yeah, I think the professors just they really liked the project a lot, and there was a lot of success. Like the students, the students who had to take this class and wear the headsets, they seem to have enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. So I think it just made sense to like take it to that level of like showing it and potentially like having other universities have similar VR experiences as well.
Dude, that is so cool. And to know that you had a hand in that, and then you were running the club, and it was one of the teams that was a part of the club that kind of branched off and did that on their own.
Yeah.
As somebody who's supporting that team, like how did you help facilitate that, and what was your role in getting that together?
Yeah, so I mostly helped at that time. I mostly helped at like, you know, making sure that people got the resources they needed. Like I know like when you're developing stuff in VR, like sometimes you need like, audio or you need like assets, so, making sure people had that. And also like a space to work because, not everyone has like an Oculus Quest at home. I mean, I know some of us do because, we're those people, but, you know, people who are like new to VR typically don't have this equipment, let alone like a good computer to run it. So, having that space available for them is also very important. And ultimately, also making sure that people felt, comfortable to like make mistakes because, especially in like this new technology, it's kind of hard to, you know, afford like, you know, like, oh shoot, I ran into a wall in VR, like literally as in like you're playing VR and then like that happens, you know, and being like, no, it's okay, it happens, and showing them like, hey, next time when you notice these lines showing up, it means you're too close to the wall, so be careful.
And one of the things that you mentioned is that just being able to get equipment, helping people facilitate just those things. With VR headsets not being as accessible as other forms of technology, for anyone out there that wants to get immersed into AR, VR, but they don't have the hardware or the equipment, like where are some places that they could go to actually get some experience? Do you have any suggestions regarding that?
Yeah, shoot, I can't remember the name of the website, but I'll probably find it after this podcast. But there was this, like, I think they were like something open VR, open XR or something. But yeah, they're like an initiative who was like, where their purpose was like to like democratize VR. And they were willing to like, give out headsets for people who want to use, VR for educational purposes. And then you might also have to look into like your local libraries and stuff. I know, like at my institution, you can like check out equipment for free. And I think in San Diego, um, assuming like people are in San Diego who are listening, some of the local libraries do. Like I think the one in downtown also has VR equipment, if I remember correctly. So you can also check that out.
Really? That's cool.
Pretty sure, because I remember like at the time they were like just starting their VR labs, so people. Well, this was like right before the pandemic, unfortunately.
Mhm,
So I don't know what the progress is with that at the moment.
mhm. And so I'm curious in terms of VR and AR, right? I've worked in this for a while now. What shape do you think it will take in the future? Like, I know there's augmented reality where you don't necessarily need to wear a device, you don't need a lot of equipment, but there's also
Hmm.
virtual reality, which is kind of the angle that Facebook is taking. Um, do you think it'll be a mix in the future? Which do you think one will be more prominent? How do you think it'll shape out in the future?
Uh, yeah, I think it's gonna ultimately depend on the application. Like I know, for training purposes, I noticed a lot of that's done in VR, and especially like in manufacturing, because that's a field, a space that my current advisor, Dr. Elliot Weiner, does a lot with.
Hmm.
And I noticed AR is primarily used for more education. So when
Hmm.
I know like people say education and training are kind of the same, but like from what I see here at Iowa State University and research, um, virtual or sorry, training is definitely more for like, yeah, you're gonna like, for example, be on the assembly line, and this is exactly what you're going to do. Um, And once you're done with this training, ideally you'll be put into like the real world and you're more or less going to do the same thing. Whereas like with education, for example, what was it? There was a project out here that was focused on like um, viewing body parts and human anatomy
Hmm.
in like different slices and angles where, sure you could get a cadaver and like slice them up and stuff, but say you want to put them back together, well, it's kind of hard to put them back together after you cut them up. So um, that's what I mean by like the difference between education and training, where one's a little bit more exploratory, where the other one's more like, you know, supposedly what you're gonna do afterwards. But yeah, going back to the question, sorry, that was like a long tangent. I definitely think all the immersive technologies will be present: AR, VR, MR, MR being mixed reality. But I think it's ultimately going to depend on the application.
Hmm.
And then another one of the things that we were talking about is like with all of these different types of AR, VR, like what are some of the upcoming, I guess, professions that are going to open up because of all of these new technologies? Because I know a lot of people that are listening in on this are like, okay, cool, I'm interested, but what can I do? Like, what's a professional pathway that I can take? Do you have any insight into that? Like, what jobs are becoming opened up with all of these new technologies kind of existing now?
Yeah, it's definitely going to open up and continue opening up because, like obviously we'll always need the programmers, we'll need the artists, we'll need the sound people, and we'll need the business people to make sure like, we have these products. But I'm also realizing we're going to need a lot of like digital content creators because just like how we have like artisans and stuff in real life, we're going to need people to transition into the digital space and do that stuff.
Hmm.
And I was just reading an article earlier about like why fashion industries are so interested in the metaverse, which I was like, that's actually pretty true. Like, why is Balenciaga in Fortnite? It's because like, yeah, we had Balenciaga like jackets and stuff in real life, but it's like, hey, let's make video game skins out of it, so you have
Hmm.
that sense of luxury
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
metaverse too. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a wild ride.
Have you seen any examples of that now that are already on the market?
Like whatchamacallit, like big brand names doing like content creation in the metaverse.
Yeah, I mean, I know VR stuff like the metaverse isn't new, so I'm just
Right.
curious. Yeah, is have you seen anything like that? Like I had never considered, fashion agencies actually considering VR to be such a viable platform.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things I've seen with like VR and like say like fashion, like with the big brands, um, there was this Unreal Engine video about it, and um, I think ultimately, sorry, I'm like trying to find the words. I think ultimately we're trying to like replicate a lot of like, you know, luxuries and things that we do in real life into the metaverse, which I think is really cool.
Hmm.
But I also think it's also a little boring because it's like, that's what the real world is for. We should like do like a lot of like, I guess, crazier and like cooler things in the metaverse and VR. But
Hmm.
that's just how I feel.
Yeah, definitely. And then also kind of bouncing off of Steve's question in terms of like what kind of potential career opportunity do you see? In my experience working in AR now, I think something that we'll need a lot of help with is UI and UX.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so has that been your experience lately? Because it seems like more so than the engineering team, we need to really keep an eye on what does the consumer want, what are they going to be willing to invest in, stuff like that.
Yes, yeah. I think because I'm like so immersed in like my research out here, like I'm so used to just trying different UIs because, there is no definite like standard user interface for VR and like all these immersive technologies. So, Um, I think that's gonna definitely be another like opportunity for people to work on. And when I say user interface, it's not just like digitally; it's also like the hardware itself too.
Hmm. Oh, okay, cool. And in terms of hardware, like wearables and stuff like that, I know we talked a little bit about like feedback. Steve mentioned Ready Player One.
Hmm.
Um, I've done some research on this, but I'm sure that you have much more time to dedicate to it since you're a full-time student. But in terms of like haptic feedback and those extra peripherals that go with your devices, have you seen anything like that on the market or anything that's being developed?
Ooh, yeah. Like, so you've probably seen like those haptic vests and stuff. That's a really big one as well. But they're actually getting a lot more sophisticated. Like, let's see. I think B Haptics. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but it's like spelled BHAPTICS.
Hmm.
They're like a startup based in South Korea.
Hmm.
Like they have like a pretty cool like haptic feedback vest and like other haptic gloves and stuff um, readily available to buy, and they're like on the more I don't want to say cheap, but because when I say cheap, it's like it's only like $1,000, $3,000, but that's like fairly that's like fairly cheap considering like this equipment's it tends to run like hundreds of thousands of dollars if you want really good ones.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one company I could think of. And in terms of like locomotion, so like walking, there's this treadmill called like Infinideck, I think.
Hmm.
It's basically like a like multi-directional treadmill. So in theory, you could like run and walk in place in VR, but feel like you're running and stuff. Um, yeah, those are like the two main ones I could think of that are like on the market and readily available.
Cool. Yeah, that stuff is super fascinating to me. And
Mm-hmm.
again, to follow up on that again, like this industry is super interesting to me. Just yesterday, I watched a video by Disney Imagineering on like how they developed the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and to me, it seems like VR and AR is going to play a huge role in that in the future, right? In terms of like the holograms and stuff like that. Do you think that's something that like VR and AR is going to have a huge like effect on?
Yes, yeah, and I think this is all just the beginning. I mean, VR has technically been around since the 60s, as I've come to learn.
Hmm.
But I think now that we actually have like more refined technology, it's just gonna keep getting better and cooler. And I hope to see the Death Star like explode in my face in real life, or not real life, but like like right here or something.
Feel the heat of the explosion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that's come out recently is a Unreal 5 demo
Ooh.
using with the Matrix, and I just
Yes.
played that recently, and that was absolutely mind blowing. And there's some questions that they have in there, just kind of like philosophical questions, like who are we going to be? Like, what's our identity going to be if we're completely digital, right?
Hmm.
If we can live in several different worlds and we can change our appearance as quickly as we change clothes, like, what is our identity going to be? And that's gonna open up so many different questions just moving forward in like what is humanity. Like, have you ever had those crazy existential questions that are in your head, with how technology is moving forward? Like, what's that thought process been like for you?
Yeah, like especially with the research I've like been seeing, there's also this thing called like a digital twin. I don't know if you guys heard of it.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so like right now in like a lot of like manufacturing, um, sorry, I'm like blanking out. There's like a technical term for this. I think the technical term was like Industry 4.0 or something. But anyways, so a digital twin is basically like a copy of you, but digital. So in theory, this digital twin of yours would be like answering emails on your behalf, as the real version of you is like out doing other things. So that's
Hmm.
also like a field that is rapidly growing as we speak. So going back to the question, like it's gonna be really like tough to say like who you are, because like if you're gonna have like say this digital twin, it's like okay, is that person also me, or is that person just like a copy of me, but the real me is the Roselynn sitting at the computer, not the Roselynn in the computer. So
Interesting.
it's gonna be it's gonna be a tough question to like answer as we get like more, I guess, like as or I should say, as our digital selves begin to blur with our real selves.
That's so cool. You know, that kind of reminded me of, again, the metaverse is a pretty old concept, right? That old Spy Kids movie where he goes into the digital world, right? In
Oh
real
boy.
life, in real life, the main character is a spy, super cool, super badass. But in the game, he's kind of a dork. He doesn't understand the game too well. He has to learn the mechanics, and all the other people that are working with him seem quote unquote cooler, but by the end of the game in real life, they're like, oh yeah, in real life, I'm just a high school nerd. What about you? Oh, well, in real life, I'm a secret agent. So it's like that whole dichotomy of your online personality versus your real life personality is going to be really interesting to see in the future.
Yeah. And I think to like add on to that, so like in a sense we kind of have like a digital twin, like, you know, um whoever however you like portray yourself in like social media, that's like technically you as well.
Hmm.
But I think the main difference we'll see in the future is like, well, that digital you will be a little bit more sentient. Like it can like interact with people digitally on your behalf as like, you know, you in real life are like doing chores at home or something.
Hmm. That's so interesting. So, do you think, I don't know how I can best put this, but like, how in social media, Instagram, you have highly curated profiles that show the best side of you. Do you think that there's going to be room to show more than that in this digital space if if it comes out that we live more in the digital space than the real one?
That's a
Like, do
good
you think
question.
how curated do you think it'll be? Like, Ready Player One kind of showed that like you can still have flaws and exist in the digital space. I'm just kind of curious, like, how deep do you think this is really gonna go?
I think it's gonna go pretty deep for sure. Like, so until we get like some more like rules and regulations, I think it's still the wild wild west at the moment,
Hmm.
and it'll probably be like that where we're gonna realize like, oh hey, you know, like maybe you shouldn't be doing this, this, and this in the metaverse, and hopefully we won't get anything like too tragic, but I do envision that we will definitely have to, I guess, be careful in what we put online.
Hmm.
Like ultimately, you know, I know I sound like, you know, an old boomer being like, "Oh darn, kids these days putting everything online," but there's still a lot of truth to that. So always be mindful of what you share, even in real life.
And one of the things like that's popped into my head is not just this, but also what are the possibility of taking our brain and then downloading that into like another avatar. So kind of like cloning in a way. And then you kind of mentioned this as well as like having multiple versions of you, and then what's that going to do to extend people's lives now,
Mm.
right? So if your consciousness is input into a different digital realm and your physical body no longer exists, but can you still exist like your personality, and like what does that mean for humanity moving forward if people can now have really infinite lives, and then not just that but have multiple. And my mind is just kind of like blowing up right now just having these thoughts. So like are there any in what do you want to see moving forward? Like what are you personally excited to see?
I, I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit, going back to like the point you made about like downloading your thoughts into like say like another body or something, or like to a computer. I believe someone is like in the process of doing that. I think they were like the like one of the co-founders of like Sirius FM XM or something like that. I have to find the name, but yeah, basically that's what they're trying to do, like to get all of their like consciousness and like thoughts and memories into like a digital body, and hopefully I hope they succeed just because I want to see what would happen.
Oof.
like, would it take a life of its own at that point, or would it just be like a stagnant human being, quote unquote? But
So
that's another question for another time.
so that would mean Walt Disney could come back to life, right? Isn't there that rumor?
Yeah.
That yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But going back to the original question, like what I'm excited to see, um, I'm just really excited to like see. Okay, well, first one's like more of like a personal thing, so I'll go into that one. The first thing I'm excited to see is just like, creating my own like virtual garden. I know
Mm,
this is really weird, but I really like flowers and stuff, and I like plants. But given that like I live in like a small apartment and in a place where the temperature like changes a lot, it's kind of hard to like grow a garden. So there's that. um, and I would love to like be able to smell like my roses in VR. Like that's something I would look forward to. So yeah, that's like the weird one, but I think ultimately what I'm most excited for is the fact that like, you know, we're going to have multiple versions of ourselves, and it's going to be very interesting how we're going to tackle our different identities in different realms
mm-hmm.
as time goes on.
Man, that sounds so
Wow,
complicated.
Yeah.
this is sounding like the multiverse, you know, as as we speak. Wow, cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I'm my mind is just exploding right now with all the different ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same
So
here.
how about you, Byron? What are you looking forward to with regards to just the metaverse and moving forward in digital selves?
Oh man, it's kind of scary, but um, I think a big part of it we've talked about before is fitness, exercise, and generally speaking, people don't like to work out, don't like to exercise. So this will be an instance where maybe it'll be more fun to actually get in shape, have a better lifestyle. Um, and I kind of wanted to comment on something you said, which I thought was kind of interesting. I brought it up to my friends last night in terms of like brain dumping into a new body. Um, like my friends were just like, yeah, well, that stuff's never been thought of before, right? And right on the spot, I blew my mind and theirs at the same time because I remembered the old Avatar movie. Remember the one with the blue creatures? Well, the
Oh,
very
yes.
ending of that movie, what did the dude who, what did he do? Do you remember that? He downloaded himself into one of those creatures and decided to live on as the creature.
Right.
The whole time, right? He was, the whole experiment was downloading their minds into the other creatures for a limited time, their avatars, and then doing that. Like, what is that if not augmented reality?
Yeah.
I just think that'd be super cool.
Same. Like,
That's you know what, I'm thinking about what types of creatures would I download my brain into. I'm thinking I would love to be able to fly. I'd love to. Where I need to find a bird where I can input my consciousness into a bird and then I can fly around.
Yeah, and then at the
I
end of
could
the
totally
day,
see
go
that.
back into your human form or whatever. I don't know.
So
But then,
maybe this
like,
stuff really does exist, and we're
yeah.
just like the older version of it. We haven't quite gotten there yet.
Oh my god,
But
don't
then,
say
like,
that.
I think, hmm. But then, like, bird version of Steve, I'm trying to think, like, as you're flying around, would you, like, retain those memories and, like, become, like, oh man, I don't know. Never mind. This is, like, well, a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, it gets pretty deep.
So cool. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to have this chat with us. I noticed that wow, already past an hour, and it's crazy how fast time goes when you're having fun and chatting about the metaverse. So, Brian, you want to take us home?
Yeah, sure.
Byron, you want to take us home?
That's
Sorry.
okay. It's okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Rosen, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. This is a really interesting conversation for me. I think, like you, VR and AR, probably thanks to the club, is what really sparked my interest and curiosity and passion towards the industry. Again, I appreciate you coming on and exposing our audience to different outlets. Sometimes it's not easy to get in the gaming industry the more traditional route. So maybe this is something that you'd want to look into in the future, because I know with Facebook, they're also looking for game designers, programmers, artists, stuff like that, because the metaverse is going to take off. It's going to be huge in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, so with that being said, where can people find you? Do you have any projects that you've posted or any research that people can keep up with in regards to your PhD? And do you post your stuff on social media or anything like that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. This was really awesome. And so, yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. So, my name's Roselynn Conrady, and I should be like one of the first results because my name is pretty unique.
Hmm.
Um, and I do have a website, it's roselynconrady.com. I do need to update that because I have been working on some more projects, so you'll probably see some more updates as the year comes to a close. But yeah, feel free to connect, and I would love to chat more.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast. And yeah, that concludes this episode of the Empower Podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, I want to remind you guys we are on all the social media platforms, TikTok. You can find us on YouTube. Our episodes are uploaded a week to 2 weeks after on there. You can also find us on Twitch and Instagram. So yeah, we're on all the platforms. Make sure to follow us if you want to keep up with what we're doing. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode.